Another day, probably in 1883, I visited the master with a few young men from Srirampur. Looking at them, he asked, "Why have they come here?" Myself, "To see you." Master, "What's there to see in me?" "Why don't they look at the buildings and temples?" Myself, "Sir, they haven't come to see those things. They have come to see you." Master, "Ah, then they must be flints. There is fire in them. You may keep a flint under water 1,000 years, but the moment you strike it, sparks fly out. They must be of that type. But it will be useless to try to strike fire out of me." At this last remark, we all laughed. I do not recall now what other things he said to us that day, but it seems to me he told us about the renunciation of woman and gold and the impossibility of getting rid of the ego. I visited him another day. When I bowed down to him and took a seat, he said, "Can you bring me some of that stuff? A little sour, a little sweet, that begins to fizz when you push down the cork?" Myself, "Lemonade?" Master, "Why don't you bring a bottle for me?" I think I brought him a bottle. So far as I remember, I was alone with him that day. I asked him a few questions. Myself, "Do you observe caste?" Master, "How can I say yes? I ate curry at Keshav Sen's house. Let me tell you what once happened to me. A man with a long beard brought some ice here, but I didn't feel like eating it." Footnote: a man with a long beard. Perhaps the master meant a Mohammedan. Footnote ends. A little later, someone brought me a piece of ice from the same man, and I ate it with great relish. You see, caste restrictions fall away of themselves. As coconut and palm trees grow up, the branches drop off of themselves. Caste conventions drop off like that. But don't tear them off, as those fools do. Meaning the Brahmos. Myself, what do you think of Keshav Babu? Master, oh, he's a saintly man. Myself, and Troilokya Babu? Master, a fine man. He sings very well. Myself, Shivanath Babu? Master, a very good man, but he argues. Myself. What is the difference between a Hindu and a Brahmo? Master. There is not much difference. In the serenade we have here, one flutist plays a single note right along, while another plays various melodies. The Brahmos play one note as it were. They hold to the formless aspect of God. But the Hindus bring out different melodies. That is to say, they enjoy God in His various aspects. The formless deity and God with form may be likened to water and ice. The water freezes into ice. The ice melts into water through the heat of jnana. Water takes the form of ice through the cooling influence of bhakti. The reality is one. People give it different names. Take the case of a lake with 4 landing ghats on its 4 banks. People who draw water at one ghat call it jal, and those who draw it at a second ghat call it pani. At the 3rd ghat, they call it water, and at the 4th, aqua. But it is one and the same thing, water. I told the master that I had met Achalanando Tirtho Bodhuto of Barisal. Master. Isn't that Ramkumar of Kotram? Myself. Yes, sir. Master. How did you like him? Myself. Very much. Master. Well, whom do you like better? Him or me? Myself. Oh, can there be any comparison between you two? He is a scholar, an erudite person. But are you one? Sri Ramakrishna was a little puzzled at my reply and became silent. A moment later I said, "He may be a scholar, but you are full of fun. There is great fun in your company." At this the master laughed and said, "Well said, well said. Right you are." He asked me, "Have you seen my Panchaboti?" Myself. Yes, sir. He told me a little of what he had practiced there, his various religious austerities. He also told me about Nangta. Then I asked him, "How can I realize God?" Master. You see, He is constantly attracting us, as a magnet attracts iron. But the iron cannot come to the magnet if it is covered with dirt. When the dirt is washed away, the iron is instantly drawn to the magnet. Weep for God, and the tears will wash away the dirt from your mind. As I was writing down his words, he remarked, "Look here, only repeating the word Siddhi will not produce intoxication. You must actually get some hemp, rub it in water, and then drink the solution." Later he said, "Since you are going to lead a householder's life, create a roseate intoxication in your mind with the thought of God. You will be doing your duties, but let that pleasant intoxication remain with you. You cannot, of course, like Shukadev, be so inebriated with the thought of God that you will lie naked and unconscious. As long as you have to live in the world, give God the power of attorney. Make over all your responsibilities to Him. Let Him do as He likes. Live in the world like a maidservant in a rich man's house. She bathes her master's children, washes them, feeds them, and takes affectionate care of them in many ways, as if they were her own children. But in her heart, she knows very well that they do not belong to her. No sooner is she dismissed than all is over. She has no more relationship with the children. Before breaking open the jackfruit, you should rub your hands with oil in order to protect them from the sticky juice. Likewise, protect yourself with the oil of devotion. Then the world will not cling to you, and you will not be affected by it. All this time, Sri Ramakrishna was seated on the floor. Now he got up and stretched himself on the cot. He said to me, "Fan me a little." I began to fan him, and he was silent. After a while he said, "Oh, it is so hot. Why don't you dip the fan in water?" "Ah," I said, "you have your fancies too." The master smiled and drawled out, "And why not?" "Very well," I said, "have your full measure of them." I cannot express in words how immensely I enjoyed his company that day.